There's a canyon where sunlight reaches the bottom for 33 minutes a day. A volcano big enough to swallow Manhattan. A forest where the trees turn to gemstone, and a reef so massive you can see it from space. We're going to visit all of them. And everywhere else worth stopping. In Death Valley, a 600-pound boulder mysteriously moved 1,500 feet across the desert floor, leaving a trail behind it like a giant slug. The Great Barrier Reef is so massive, it's the only living structure visible from space. You can literally see life from orbit. And Yellowstone's supervolcano is so powerful that if it erupted, it would cover most of the United States in ash and trigger a global ice age. But the weirdness doesn't stop with moving rocks and space-visible reefs. In Denali National Park, Mount McKinley creates its own weather system so violent that climbers can experience negative 40-degree temperatures in July. At Joshua Tree, the park's namesake trees aren't actually trees. They're the world's largest yucca plants that can live over 150 years. And Sequoia National Park's General Sherman tree weighs as much as 15 blue whales and adds enough new wood each year to build a 60-foot-tall tree. The forces shaping these places are equally mind-blowing. In Glacier Bay, the ice is retreating so fast you can literally watch the landscape change. The bay has grown 65 miles since 1750. Antelope Canyon is so narrow that at noon, sunbeams create laser-like shafts of light that photographers wait years to capture. Now let's dive into these incredible places themselves. You're standing at the rim in a winter jacket, shivering. Meanwhile, a mile straight down, hikers at the Colorado River are peeling off layers in heat 25 degrees warmer. One canyon. Two completely different climates. The Grand Canyon stretches 277 miles long and plunges over a mile into the earth, and those exposed rock walls tell a story spanning nearly 2 billion years. That's close to half the age of the planet itself, stacked in horizontal bands of rust, amber, and deep violet. At sunset, the whole thing ignites. Light pours across the layered stone from Mather Point, and shadows carve the canyon even deeper than it already is. The Havasupai, Hopi, and Navajo peoples have considered this ground sacred for thousands of years. And when you stand at that edge, watching color drain into the abyss as the sun disappears, you understand why no one ever leaves unchanged. Did you know that Canada's entire national park system exists because 3 railway workers stumbled into a cave? In 1885, they discovered hot springs steaming through the Rocky Mountain rock, and the government moved fast. Claiming the land, building a park, kickstarting a conservation tradition that now spans the country. But the Stoney Nakoda people had known these mountains for thousands of years before any rail was laid. Their connection to this land runs deep into the stone itself. You feel that weight when you stand at Moraine Lake, where glacial meltwater pools into a blue, so impossibly turquoise it looks engineered. It isn't. Tiny particles of rock flour, ground fine by ancient glaciers, suspend in the water and bend light into that electric color. Over 2,500 square miles of wilderness sprawl across the Canadian Rockies here. Jagged peaks, elk-dotted valleys, forests thick with silence. At golden hour, the light spills across Lake Louise like liquid copper, and everything else just falls away. You're standing on top of a supervolcano. Right now, beneath your feet, a massive magma chamber stretches 40 miles across, generating enough heat to power the largest concentration of geysers anywhere on Earth. Yellowstone isn't just a national park. It's the planet's thin skin stretched over raw, unimaginable force. Established in 1872 as the first national park in the world, this 3,400 square mile wilderness smells like sulfur and feels like another planet. The Grand Prismatic Spring sprawls before you in rings of orange, yellow, and deep turquoise, colors created by heat-loving bacteria thriving in near-boiling water. Old Faithful erupts on a schedule almost eerily reliable, launching thousands of gallons skyward every 90 minutes or so. Arrive at dawn, when steam rises off every thermal feature at once, and the whole landscape disappears into white mist. The earth here isn't still. It breathes. Did you know the rocks here are over 200 million years old, but the canyon cutting through them is barely 1 million? That makes Zion one of the youngest canyons on the planet, slicing through some of the most ancient stone in North America. And you feel that tension everywhere. Towering walls of red and cream sandstone rise 2,600 feet above you, so close together in places that the sky narrows to a sliver. Wade into the narrows and the Virgin River swirls around your ankles, still carving, still working. The same modest river that sculpted this entire 15-mile gorge. Then there's the Great White Throne, the largest sheer rock face in the country, glowing amber at golden hour like something out of a fever dream. Come early morning, when light first spills over the canyon rim and every surface ignites. Zion doesn't just sit there. It burns. Everest gets all the glory. But here's the thing. Denali actually rises higher. Measured from base to summit, this colossus climbs 18,000 feet from the surrounding lowlands, dwarfing Everest's rise from its base camp plateau. 6 million acres of raw, unfiltered Alaska sprawl beneath it. You stand on the tundra, and the air hits different. Pine resin and cold earth, sharp enough to make your lungs ache. In autumn, the ground blazes copper and crimson, a carpet of colors stretching to a horizon that never seems to end. Glaciers crack and calve into milky rivers with a sound like distant thunder. The Athabascan people named it Denali, the Great One, long before any map tried to call it something else. Did you know the granite towers at the heart of this park are 12 million years old? Born from volcanic fire, then carved into razor-sharp spires by glaciers that ground through Patagonia like slow-moving sculptors? Torres del Paine sits at the southern edge of Chile, and nothing quite prepares you for the scale. 3 colossal pillars jut from the earth, rising over 8,000 feet, their surfaces raw and ancient against skies that shift from storm gray to brilliant blue in minutes. Below them, Lake Pejuas stretches out in a shade of turquoise that seems almost artificial. That impossible color comes from glacial sediment so fine it bends light. Herds of guanacos graze the surrounding steppe, unfazed by the wind that never stops. The largest population in Chile, just roaming free. Arrive at dawn. When first light hits those towers, the granite burns gold, and the whole landscape feels like it belongs to another planet entirely. You can see it from Seattle on a clear day. A white dome floating above the skyline like something out of a dream. But here's the thing. Mount Rainier is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the United States. Active. Monitored around the clock. And 2.5 million people live in its shadow. Yet every summer, wildflowers erupt across the meadows at Paradise. Lupines, paintbrush, avalanche lilies. Their sweet, earthy fragrance hanging in cool mountain air while 25 glaciers grind slowly down the flanks above you. 14,411 feet of volcanic rock and ancient ice, the most glaciated peak in the lower 48. It became America's 5th national park back in 1899, and people have been drawn to this contradiction ever since. Catch it at sunrise when alpenglow turns the summit from white to molten copper, and you'll understand why nobody leaves. Did you know this is the only place on Earth where alligators and crocodiles coexist in the wild? The Everglades looks like a swamp, but here's the thing. It's actually a river. 1.5 million acres of water creeping southward at just an inch per hour. So slow you'd never know it was moving. You stand in the sawgrass marshes at dawn, and the world stretches flat in every direction. No horizon line, just green dissolving into mist. After rain, the air hits you. Thick, earthy, alive with the smell of wet soil and decay feeding new growth. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss rise like ghosts, and overhead, roseate spoonbills cut across the sky in brilliant pink streaks. Nothing prepares you for how quiet power feels when it barely moves at all. Rain that falls on a single ridge here drains into 3 separate oceans: the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Arctic. No other place in North America can claim that. They call it the crown of the continent, and once you arrive, you understand why. 1 million acres of raw, glacially carved wilderness sprawl before you. The going to the sun road winds through it all, clinging to cliff faces as mountain goats watch from ledges above. Stop at Lake McDonald and look down. The water glows turquoise from glacial silt, so vivid it almost looks artificial. Over 700 lakes hide among these peaks, fed by 26 remaining glaciers, the largest in the lower 48 and shrinking every year. At sunrise, alpenglow sets the ridgelines on fire. Pink, then gold. Then silence. Those twisted, spiky silhouettes lining the horizon. They're not actually trees. Joshua trees are yuccas, desert plants that can live over 150 years, and they only thrive where 2 ecosystems collide. This park sprawls across nearly 800,000 acres where the Mojave meets the Colorado Desert, and that collision creates something you won't find anywhere else on Earth. The world's largest Joshua tree forest. You walk among boulders older than 100 million years, formations stacked like some giant's forgotten playground. At sunset, the cholla cactus garden ignites, each spine catching golden light until the whole landscape glows. Then rain hits the creosote bushes, and that sharp, earthy perfume fills the air. Imagine squeezing through a passage barely 3 feet wide, then looking straight up. Sandstone walls spiral 120 feet above you, carved into liquid shapes by thousands of years of flash floods. This is Antelope Canyon. The Navajo call it Saguaro, the place where water runs through the rock, and they consider it sacred ground. You press your palm against the wall. Cool, impossibly smooth, like touching sculpted silk. Around midday in summer, something extraordinary happens. Shafts of light pierce the narrow openings overhead and ignite the sandstone in deep orange, violet, burning red. The colors shift by the minute. Dust particles float through the beams like tiny galaxies. 1,000 feet of canyon, and every inch of it feels alive, breathing, glowing, waiting to be witnessed. Here's something that might surprise you. The granite walls of Yosemite are over 100 million years old, yet geologically, they're considered some of the youngest granite formations on the planet. El Capitan, the largest exposed granite monolith in the world, rises 3,000 feet straight up from the valley floor. 3,000 feet of sheer, polished rock. You stand at tunnel view, and the scale just doesn't compute. Half-dome floating in the distance, Yosemite Falls plunging 2,400 feet in a white ribbon of meltwater. After rain, the air turns sharp with pine and every surface gleams. This was the first landscape America ever chose to protect, back in 1864, when Lincoln signed it into safekeeping. Picture an island so remote that the only way to reach it is by seaplane or boat. No roads, no bridges, no cell service. Isle Royale sits in the cold heart of Lake Superior, and fewer people visit in an entire year than visit most national parks in a single day. That isolation created something scientists have obsessed over for 6 decades, a completely sealed ecosystem where moose and wolves play out their ancient drama with zero outside interference. The longest predator-prey study on Earth, unfolding right here. You hike the Greenstone Ridge through dense boreal forest, rain-soaked pine filling your lungs, and the silence is almost physical. Rocky shorelines drop into water so clear you can count stones 20 feet down. At dawn, mist lifts off the lake like the island is exhaling. Did you know there's a canyon in Colorado where sunlight reaches the bottom for only 33 minutes a day? Black Canyon of the Gunnison earns its name honestly. Walls of dark Precambrian rock. Some of the oldest exposed stone in the country. Plunge over 2,700 feet straight down, while the canyon pinches to just 1,100 feet across at its narrowest. You stand at chasm view and peer over the edge, and the depth swallows sound itself. Down below, the Gunnison River glows an impossible blue against walls streaked in deep purple and charcoal gray. The painted wall rises sheer, veined with pink and white mineral bands like brushstrokes on dark canvas. 10,000 years to build. 30 feet of thickness lost every single year. Kenai Fjords is vanishing before our eyes, and standing at the edge of Exit Glacier, you can actually watch it happen. The ice groans. A crack echoes off the fjord walls. Then, a chunk the size of a building plunges into the ocean, sending turquoise waves surging toward your boat. You smell it before you see it sometimes. That sharp, mineral bite of glacial ice cutting through the salt air. Across nearly 670,000 acres, tidewater glaciers still carve into the sea while humpback whales breach in the channels below. Come early morning, when soft light turns the ice electric blue, a color that feels almost impossible. The boardwalk disappears into shadow, and the canopy closes overhead like a cathedral ceiling. Welcome to Congaree, home to the largest intact old-growth bottomland hardwood forest remaining in North America. Some of these loblolly pines tower over 150 feet, making them the tallest trees in the eastern United States. 1,000 years old, some of them. You walk beneath their moss-draped limbs and the air hits you. Rich, damp, thick with the smell of wet earth and decomposing leaves. This entire forest lives on a floodplain, shaped by water that rises and retreats with the seasons, feeding a biodiversity so dense that species exist here found nowhere else on the planet. Early morning is when Congaree reveals itself, Mist curling off still water, silence pressing in, those ancient trunks standing like monuments no one planned to build. Did you know two rivers can meet and refuse to mix? At Canyonlands, the Colorado and Green Rivers converge in a slow, swirling embrace. Yet their waters hold separate colors for miles downstream, one muddy red, the other gray-green, each carrying different sediment loads like stubbornly independent travelers sharing the same road. Utah's largest national park sprawls across more than 300,000 acres of rock that began forming over 300 million years ago. You stand at Island in the Sky, a mesa rising 1,000 feet above everything, and the layered earth stretches in every direction. Rust, amber, cream. Ancestral Puebloans once carved stories into these walls over 10,000 years ago. At sunrise, light floods Mesa Arch like liquid copper, and the silence out here feels almost geological itself. It was named after the devil by accident. A government surveyor misheard a settler's description, and the name stuck. Even though over 20 tribal nations consider this one of the most sacred places on the continent. Devil's Tower juts from the Wyoming prairie like a fist of stone, rising over 1,200 feet with vertical columns so perfectly ridged they look engineered. 50 million years of erosion stripped away everything soft, leaving behind one of the largest columns of igneous rock on Earth. You stand at its base, craning your neck, running your hands along grooves rough as tree bark while grasslands stretch endlessly behind you. In 1906, Theodore Roosevelt made this America's very first national monument. At sunset, the columns glow amber against a violet sky. Ancient, unexplained, and impossible to look away from. Imagine a living thing so patient it waits 50 to 70 years just to grow its first arm. That's the saguaro cactus. The largest in the United States, towering up to 78 feet tall, living for more than 150 years. And an entire national park exists to protect them. You stand among thousands at sunset, their silhouettes rising like sentinels against a sky bleeding orange and crimson across the Sonoran Desert. The Tohono O'odham Nation has harvested their fruit for centuries, turning it into traditional wines and syrups long before any boundary lines were drawn. In spring, white blossoms crown each arm, opening only at night. Dawn fades, the desert cools, and these ancient giants hold their ground. Did you know California's largest stretch of undeveloped coastline once sheltered the outlaw Jesse James? 90 miles of Big Sur wind along cliffs that plunge 1,000 feet straight into the Pacific. Rock formations over 100 million years old, still being carved by every wave. You stand at the edge, salt air mixing with the sweetness of coastal wildflowers, and a shadow passes overhead. Enormous. A California condor, wingspan stretching nearly 10 feet, riding thermals off the Santa Lucia Mountains. This is the only place on Earth you'll find them along the coast. At Meckway Falls, 80 feet of water cascades directly onto a crescent of sand. And at Golden Hour, Pfeiffer Beach glows in shades of purple and amber, colors that don't seem real until you're standing in them. Imagine a mountain losing 1,300 feet of itself in a single morning. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens did exactly that, the largest volcanic eruption in the contiguous United States that century. You stand at the Johnston Ridge Observatory now, and the gaping horseshoe crater stretches before you, raw and enormous. But here's what gets me. Life came back. Wildflowers push through ash fields. Elk roam valleys that were moonscaped 40 years ago. Spirit Lake still shimmers below, choked with thousands of floating logs from that day. Sulfur drifts on the wind. The mountain is still growing. Did you know that beneath this alien landscape lies one of the richest fossil beds on Earth? Saber-toothed cats, three-toed horses. Creatures from 75 million years ago locked inside these striped walls of sediment. The Lakota Sioux called it Mako Sika, bad land, and you understand why standing here. No water. No shade. Just 244,000 acres of jagged spires and layered rock that erosion has been sculpting since before anything human existed. At sunset, those layers ignite, bands of rust, cream, and violet stacking toward a pink sky. The wind carries nothing but silence. 750 feet of sand rise against the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the tallest dunes in all of North America, and they've been building for 440,000 years. You climb barefoot, sinking into warm golden grains that shift color hour by hour, rust at dawn, honey by midday, violet at dusk. But here's what catches you off guard. Walk a few miles in any direction and you'll hit wetlands, alpine forests, even creeks. The Ute people believed these sands were the ashes of ancient giants. Standing at the crest, wind sculpting ripples around your feet, that story feels right. The river carved this gorge before the mountains even existed. 300 million years. Older than the Appalachians themselves, older than dinosaurs. The new river has been cutting through rock since before most life on Earth looked the way it does now. You stand at the rim and peer down 1,000 feet into dense forest, damp moss and rich soil rising on the breeze. A steel arch, the longest single span in the Western Hemisphere, stretches across the chasm like it belongs there. Below, white water churns through rapids that draw rafters from everywhere. Soldiers picking blackberries in the middle of a battle. That actually happened here. During the First Battle of Bull Run, the Civil War's opening clash, troops from the 14th Brooklyn Regiment were so confident of victory they paused to forage. Hours later, both armies dissolved into chaos across these same rolling fields. You walk Henry Hill at dawn, mist clinging to the grass, and the quiet feels almost impossible. Damp earth rises after rain, the same smell those soldiers knew. A serene place holding unimaginable disorder. Did you know there's a spot on the U.S. East Coast where you can catch the sunrise before anyone else in the country? From October through March, Cadillac Mountain earns that distinction. The first light in America touches its granite summit. You stand in the dark, pine and salt air swirling around you, and then the Atlantic horizon cracks open in gold. This was the first national park east of the Mississippi, carved by 400 million years of ice and ocean. Below, Thunder Hole roars as waves slam into ancient rock, sending spray skyward against the pink dawn. Over 2,000 stone arches carved into one landscape. Nowhere else on Earth comes close. And the sculptor? Ice. Water seeps into hairline cracks, freezes overnight, expands, and slowly shatters sandstone that's been here for 150 million years. You stand beneath delicate arch at sunrise, and the rock blazes copper against snow-capped La Salle Mountains. Ancestral Puebloans once walked these same corridors, leaving petroglyphs etched into walls the color of rusted iron. From ancient forests to volcanic peaks, We've walked through nature's greatest masterpieces together, each park a reminder of what we're fighting to preserve. If you want more journeys like this, subscribe. Which park called to you most? Share your thoughts below.